Imagine for a moment that you are carrying a suitcase you never packed, heavy, quiet, always there. You don't know what's inside, but you've felt its weight since childhood. It wraps itself around your chest in still moments, silences your joy, and tightens its grip when you try to breathe freely. A sadness with no name, a tension that belongs to no event you recall. And yet, it lives in you. Perhaps it was never yours. Perhaps it was your mother's, or her mother's. A sorrow passed not through words, but through silence, gestures, avoidance. This video is for those who feel a grief that didn't begin with them. Through Jung's lens and spiritual insight, you will learn how inherited emotional wounds shape your identity, how to break free from unconscious loyalty, and how to finally say, "This ends with me." If you've always sensed that something wasn't yours, but still lived inside you, this message is for you. Some inherit eye color, others inherit silence. And in that silence, a child learns about love, about worth, about how much space they're allowed to take. You grew up listening to what was not said, learning to read moods instead of hearing truth. And in that quiet, you absorbed not only her pain, but also her story about who you needed to be. The scriptures say, "The parents have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge." Ezekiel 18:2. What was unresolved in her becomes confusion in you. What was hidden in her becomes shadow in your identity. You were never meant to carry it, but you are the one strong enough to name it. That's not a burden. That's a calling. This is not a place of blame. This is an invitation to awaken, to feel, to see clearly. You are not here to carry her wound. You are here to understand it, transform it, and finally set it down. Healing is not about making the past disappear. It's about refusing to repeat it unconsciously. I invite you now to take the first step toward your healing by writing, what emotion do you feel was passed down in silence? Putting it into words is not just cathartic, it's the first act of reclaiming what belongs to you and releasing what never did. There are aches in your body that have nothing to do with injury. There's a tightness in your chest when you think about family, a weight in your stomach when you try to rest, a lump in your throat when nothing seems wrong. It's the kind of pain that escapes logic but not feeling. Your body remembers what your mind cannot explain. You might call it anxiety, fatigue, overthinking, but deep down, something in you whispers, "This is not mine." It's older. It's been living inside your muscles, your breath, your posture. It's not just in your emotions, it has shaped your biology. This is the silent inheritance of unprocessed emotion, sorrow encoded into the body like a second skin. Not all trauma comes from violence or chaos. Some comes from absence, from the quiet tension in a room, from the way your mother sighed without words, from growing up sensing something wasn't right without anyone ever saying it. Many people are haunted not by what was done to them, but by what was never spoken. And so they grow up in families that smile on the outside, but carry shadows beneath the surface, generational ghosts that pass through silence. You may have learned early that it wasn't safe to feel, that your joy was too loud, your sadness too much. So you learned to shrink, to watch, to carry peace on your back like a duty. This is what Jung understood when he explored the unconscious as a field of inherited memory. You are not only influenced by your own experiences, but by the stories and emotional truths your lineage never processed. A mother who never felt safe will teach her child to feel unsafe. A grandmother who swallowed her grief will pass down an inability to grieve. These patterns do not require intention to take root. They only need repetition. And repetition, when left unexamined, becomes personality. But personality is not destiny. It's just the starting point of awareness. It's tempting to believe we're broken, when in truth we're just continuing a cycle we never chose. The nervous system adapts to emotional weather like trees bend to wind. And if you've always been the strong one, the reliable one, the quiet one, it may be because someone before you didn't have space to be those things. You became what your environment required. But what your environment required is not always what your soul needed. That split, the one between who you are and who you've had to be, is not your failure. It's your starting point, and recognizing that difference is the beginning of deep healing. So now, when these strange feelings rise, the tension, the fatigue, the sadness with no name, don't rush to push them away. These sensations are messengers. They carry information from the past, encoded in your present. You feel them because life is asking you to, not to suffer, but to see, to become the one who feels what others suppressed, the one who names what others denied, the one who lets go, consciously, lovingly, what was never theirs to carry. And in doing so, you no longer just survive your story, you begin to transform it. Before you ever spoke your first words, before you knew your own name, you looked into the face of a woman and learned everything. Her gaze taught you if you were safe. Her tone taught you if you were allowed to cry. Her silence shaped the way you would later speak to yourself. And if her heart was burdened, if love had cost her too much, then you inherited not only her affection, but also her fear. The mother lives in you as more than memory. She becomes an inner blueprint, not just who she was, but how she felt about herself, how she treated her own needs, how she responded to pain. That becomes the voice inside your mind. It whispers what's too much, what's not enough, what must be earned. And very often we mistake that voice for truth, when it's simply transmission. When a mother has unhealed wounds, her love can come laced with conditions. You feel held, but not free. Close, but not fully seen. Her protection becomes control. Her care becomes sacrifice, and without realizing it, you grow into someone who confuses love with performance, who adapts instead of expresses, who carries instead of questions. This is not about judgment, it's about clarity. Because until you see the way she lives in your beliefs, your relationships, your sense of self, you won't know where she ends and you begin. And if your image of love is shaped by her wounds, then freedom begins by looking at her, not just as mother, but as woman. To break the cycle, you must first name the pattern. Who was she before the world broke her spirit? What did she lose, suppress, forget? And what of that story have you mistaken for your own? Healing does not start with blame. It starts with vision, the courage to see clearly and the grace to choose differently. You were just a child, but already you could feel the emotional weight in the room. You noticed when her eyes looked distant, when her voice trembled without words. You didn't know the reasons, but your body reacted. You quieted your needs, softened your presence, and made space for her sorrow. Without being told, you took on a role, the steady one, the soothing one, the one who wouldn't make it worse. That's how love looked. That's how you survived. This is how role reversal begins, subtly, silently. When a mother is emotionally drowning, a child becomes the shore. You learn to listen before you speak, to anticipate her sadness, to absorb what she doesn't express. No one tells you it's your responsibility, but it becomes yours, because you're the only one who feels it, and that sense of duty seeps into your bones, shaping how you love, how you work, how you exist. You begin to believe that your value lives in your ability to hold others together. You become competent, helpful, emotionally available, but only for others. Your own needs? They get buried beneath the urgency of keeping peace. Even as an adult, you're the one who fixes, supports, sacrifices, but inside you're tired. Not just from doing too much, but from never having had the chance to simply be. That weariness you feel, it's not laziness. It's the cost of being emotionally vigilant for too long. It's the weight of a childhood lived in adult posture, and beneath it all is a quiet, holy grief, a longing to be held instead of holding, a yearning to collapse without guilt, a desire to finally stop saving others and start saving yourself. To heal, you must return to that child, not to stay there, but to free them. Ask, who did I become to protect her? Then ask, what did I lose in the process? And when you listen long enough, you'll begin to hear something sacred beneath the silence, your own voice, asking to be heard. Sometimes, who you think you are isn't really you. It's a shape you learned to take in a house where certain emotions had no place. Maybe you learned to be the quiet one, not because that's your nature, but because there was no room for your noise. Maybe you became the strong one because no one else could fall apart. And over time, those survival masks started to feel like your face. In many families, it's not what is said that teaches the most. It's what remains unspoken. Unprocessed grief, buried anger, invisible fear, all these pass silently from one generation to the next. And children with their open hearts absorb it like a language. They begin to form their identity not by who they are, but by who they must be to maintain harmony. That's how the silence trains the self. You might believe you're calm, mature, in control. But what if those traits are defenses? What if they're not your essence, but your armor? Your stillness may be the result of growing up in a place where chaos was always one word away. Your independence may stem from never feeling safe to depend on anyone. What you call personality might just be protection. There is nothing wrong with being adaptive. Adaptation is how you survived, but healing begins when you gently ask, what parts of me came from fear, not truth? And more importantly, which parts of me have never had a chance to speak? In the comments, I invite you to name one piece of yourself you feel had to be hidden to keep the peace. Writing it is more than expression. It's a sacred act of reclaiming, a declaration that you no longer need to betray your truth to belong. Freedom should feel like relief, like breath, like truth. But for many, it feels wrong, heavy, even cruel. You take steps toward your own life, new choices, new joy, and suddenly there's a voice inside that whispers, you're abandoning her. You feel a tightness in your chest, not from the act itself, but from what it seems to mean, that your healing is a betrayal. This is not logical guilt, it's emotional inheritance. When you grow up intertwined with a mother's pain, her sadness becomes sacred. Her suffering becomes a bond, and any attempt to separate, even lovingly, feels like a violation of that bond. You learned that loyalty means staying close to pain, that love means carrying what hurts. But that isn't love, that's fusion. It's hard to say out loud, but many people dim their joy so they don't outshine their mother's shadow. They stay small, so she doesn't feel smaller. They sabotage intimacy, success, rest, because somewhere deep down they fear their happiness will highlight her wounds. And so they shrink, thinking it's kindness. But what if your light was never a threat, only a mirror? Your freedom does not dishonor her. Your healing does not erase her. In fact, it completes the love she tried to give. True love doesn't demand suffering in return. It invites transformation. And that begins when you stop equating guilt with loyalty and start choosing life without apology. You are not leaving her behind. You are stepping forward with everything she couldn't. And that's not abandonment. It's continuation. A continuation with eyes open, heart awake, and courage enough to walk where she could not. You promised yourself you'd be different, that you wouldn't become like her, that you'd break the cycle. But here you are, choosing partners who feel emotionally distant, losing yourself in work to feel worthy, repeating dynamics that make you feel invisible. And you wonder, why am I back here again? Repetition is not failure, it's communication. It's your soul trying to speak through the language of pattern. Each loop is not a punishment, but a message. There's something here you haven't seen yet. When pain resurfaces, it's not because you're weak. It's because the wound is still active, and your inner self is wise enough not to give up on healing. What if the things you keep reliving are not just habits, but attempts at repair? A mother who never felt chosen might raise a daughter who chooses unavailable love because it feels familiar. A son who was never truly seen might become an adult who chases attention but mistrusts intimacy. The pattern isn't there to trap you. It's there to ask, will you respond differently this time? Carl Jung called these unresolved emotional nodes complexes, knots in the psyche that pull our strings until we see them. But you are not powerless. In fact, your awareness changes everything. The moment you recognize the script is the moment you begin to rewrite it. You're not reliving the past because you failed to grow. You're reliving it because a part of you is still hoping to get it right. And maybe, just maybe this time, you will. There is a kind of healing that begins the moment you put words to what has always lived unnamed. Until then, it moves in the dark, shaping your reactions, your fears, your relationships. You don't know why you push people away, why you feel responsible for everyone, why happiness feels foreign. But when you speak it, I felt responsible for her sadness. I never felt chosen. I hid my feelings to keep the peace. Suddenly, the fog begins to lift. What was vague becomes visible, and what is visible can be healed. The silence in many families isn't just absence of sound. It's a wall built over generations, brick by invisible brick. It's the look that said, "Don't talk about that." The subject that was always skipped, the grief that stayed behind the eyes, and when you grow up inside that silence, you shape yourself around it. You become careful, self-contained, pleasing. Not because it's your essence, but because it's how you survived the unspoken. And yet your truth, your real, messy, radiant truth, has been waiting beneath that silence all along. Naming is not about blaming, it's about restoring your voice. Because what you don't name owns you. It drives your choices in secret, governs your boundaries, clouds your intuition. But when you speak it, on paper, in therapy, in whispered prayers, you release its grip. You move it from shadow to light, from symptom to story, from confusion to clarity. That act alone is revolutionary, because what has been buried in your body for years is finally being honored by your voice. To say, "This was too much," is not weakness. To say, "I needed more," is not betrayal. It is the most sacred form of truth-telling. It's your soul reclaiming its right to exist without apology. It's the first crack in the inherited wall, the beginning of a new language, one built not on silence but on presence. On honesty, on love that doesn't require you to disappear. Before she was your mother, she was a girl, a daughter, a dreamer, a soul who carried wounds of her own long before she ever held you in her arms. But most of us don't meet our mothers in that version. We meet them at the point where their hope and exhaustion collided. We meet them mid-battle, never knowing the wars they already lost. And so we inherit not only their love, but also the ache beneath it. To see her as she truly was is not betrayal. It is the beginning of your liberation. You might remember her as cold, as controlling, as unpredictable. But perhaps she was a child once told to stop crying, told that her needs were too much, her dreams unrealistic. Maybe no one ever listened to her story. Maybe she had to grow up too fast and mothered you the only way she knew, through armor. And yet, the child in you still aches for something she couldn't give: softness, understanding, space. That ache doesn't mean you're ungrateful, it means you're honest, and healing begins with honesty. To heal is not to erase what hurt, it is to reframe it with compassion and truth. Jung taught that individuation requires us to break the projections we place on our parents, to stop seeing them as gods or villains, and instead as people, imperfect, wounded, trying. When you say, "You hurt me, and I see your pain too," you don't excuse the harm, you reclaim your clarity. You exit the cycle of blame and step into the space where transformation is finally possible. Forgiveness, when it comes, is not about forgetting. It's about releasing the burden of carrying someone else's choices as your own. It's about choosing not to repeat what you never consented to inherit. You may never get the apology you longed for, but you can give yourself the understanding you always needed. That is what makes you different. Not perfect, but awake. Awake enough to choose compassion without collapsing into silence again. Let her be who she was. And you, be who you are now. Separate, connected, free. The thread between you can remain, but it doesn't have to choke you anymore. It can soften, it can breathe, and through your healing, it can begin to bless instead of bind. You are not here to carry what broke them. You are here to see it clearly, feel it fully, and choose differently. That choice is not dramatic, it's sacred. It means saying, "It ends with me." Not with anger, not with denial, but with awareness, with quiet power, with the strength to hold pain without letting it define you. That is the true ending and the real beginning. Maybe you won't fix it all, maybe some wounds will still echo, but you can choose not to pass them forward. You can become the first in your family line to say, "No more," not as rebellion, but as redemption. You don't have to keep proving your worth. You don't have to keep shrinking to stay connected. Love that requires you to abandon yourself is not love, it's memory. And now you are choosing something new. Write, speak, rest, mourn, say what was never said. Bless what was broken. Not because it was right, but because it shaped you. And now you are reshaping yourself. That is your legacy, not to repeat, but to repair, not to erase, but to evolve. Your life becomes the turning point between silence and truth, shame and dignity, survival and soul. You are not just your mother's child. You are the bridge between what came before and what can be born from now on. Many spend a lifetime being strong, silent, and responsible for everyone but themselves. But true strength is not about carrying everything. It's about saying, "This was too much, and I deserve something different." Healing doesn't mean rewriting the past. It means refusing to let it dictate your future. By looking at your story with open eyes and a softer heart, you give yourself what no one else could: permission to be whole. If this message awakened something inside you, don't stop here. Watch the next video appearing on your screen. It will take you even deeper into the mysteries of the human mind and soul. Subscribe to the channel and keep walking with us. There's more truth to uncover, more healing to reclaim, and more of you waiting to be remembered.